Hi everyone, welcome to the show. I'm sitting here with that phenomenal mentor, advisor, SME ecosystem builder, somebody who, thanks to his grey hair, has been around the block, Rick Ed. He's done a lot of work with entrepreneurs, and just before we started shooting, we had actually an interesting discussion around what works and what doesn't. So welcome to the show. This is for entrepreneurs, by those who've been around the block. Rick, I've been to a lot of your presentation. I've followed a lot of your blogs and your Twitters and so forth. And one of the things that comes through is your passion for entrepreneurs, but you marry it with a dose of realism that very few people in that space bring about. What is your frustration with this thing called entrepreneurship? You were talking to me, for example, a minute ago about, out of 1,000 people, etc. Tell me a bit more about that.
Okay, so I'm going to really talk about entrepreneurship in the South African context because it has certain nuances. But there is, for me, a characteristic that is universal, and that is that if you have, let's say, 1,000 people, of those 1,000, probably about 100 are able to run their own businesses, be self-employed, sole proprietors, partners. But of those, only one would be what one would truly call an entrepreneur.
And, the world is moving towards a space where entrepreneurship is the future. How do we marry that reality of only one being a real entrepreneur and versus this world that actually is designed for self-starters?
Yes. Oddly enough, we're going back 200 years where everybody was already a self-employed person. So there was the odd person that would invent the cotton gin or the steam engine. Those were the entrepreneurs. But everybody was in fact self-employed. The majority of people farmed, or they made implements, or they made preserves, or they healed people, or they fought wars. But each person was a self-employed person, a person who had their own little business.
So you're saying actually we should differentiate between entrepreneurship and self-employment.
It's very important in the South African context because fortunately the government has called the Department of Small Business. But we frequently talk about small business people as entrepreneurs when they are not, and we're expecting them to exhibit these entrepreneurial qualities.
So how does this fit in with your passion? So we often have this debate. So I, for example, come from a school that says you should fail as an entrepreneur multiple times because otherwise nothing remains here. All the knowledge goes in one ear and out the others, and yet you maintain that actually entrepreneurs shouldn't have to fail that much. How does that fit into this mantra of a small business versus the entrepreneur? Are you talking about small businesses don't need to fail, or are you talking about the entrepreneurial space?
Yes, I think it's important to distinguish between those two, because entrepreneurs are going to take chances, they're going to take risks, and usually they're smart, so they take calculated risks. And so they know, they factor in the fact that they are going to make mistakes, which I prefer to the term fail, because fail means that devastating disaster where you lose everything. And in the South African context, we can't afford the luxury of a business failing. And it's not necessary for a business to fail. It's okay for it to make mistakes, to misjudge, or let's say the owner to misjudge the environment in which it operates, market factors that change. We're sitting in Eskom load shedding. You can't prepare for every eventuality. So your average small business owner, there are certain rules, like there are in any business or sport. There are certain rules, and if you play by those rules and you don't glamorize the mistakes that you've made, then I think we can have more people succeeding.
What do you mean by glamorizing the mistakes you made?
There are too many posts Twitter tweets, diagrams, pictures, books, podcasts that talk about failing often, failing forward, and making it look like it is the done thing to fail. And there are people who have said if you haven't failed, you haven't tried hard enough, which may be good for entrepreneurs, but not for your ordinary business person.
That's a powerful point you make. And I would love to unpack that a little bit more. If you were standing in front of the entrepreneurs watching, what kind of advice that comes from your experience in mentoring, supervising, and helping businesses now? What kind of advice would you say? What are these rules that you should abide by to reduce your risk of failure?
I think both entrepreneurs specifically and small business owners in general, the main rule is in fact to fail forward, is to learn from the mistakes. And unfortunately, a lot of us, and I'm not certain that it's a masculine thing, but it has been my experience that men are less likely to learn, are less likely to be open to learning. So when there is learning to be had before a failure, men don't take cognizance of that, and they fail, and then sometimes do not learn from the failure.
Give me a practical example from an entrepreneur, for example, you see now without obviously mentioning names.
It's actually very common. So somebody comes up with an example of an app, and in fact I'm thinking of a particular app, and it's not even a South African case, it's somebody in Nairobi. He recognized the fact that traffic in Nairobi is appalling, and when you finish work at 5 o'clock, it's going to take you 3 hours to get to the grocery store, but at 8 o'clock they close anyway. So he came up with a kind of Uber Eats app and said, place your order, they will fetch the food from the grocery store. And I asked him, did you check and see whether there isn't such an app in Kenya? And in fact, he hadn't. There are 3 organizations that do what he had imagined.
And is that, and when you say not learning, is just, advice is there, check your competitors are, but we are so, do you think it's based on fear of failure, of rejection, that our idea may not so brilliant, so we kind of just do tunnel vision, put our horse blinds on?
It's very tricky because there are many different categories. So those people who are necessity entrepreneurs, or let's say necessity lifestyle business owners, they won't necessarily think this issue through. They won't have the context, they won't have what they call the cultural capital to be able to analyze the situation. But there are lots of people who are a little better off, those kinds of people who are able to design mobile apps, who become terribly precious about the app, or their design or their product. I have invented an awesome coffee making machine that fits in a cup. Everybody would want it.
Yeah.
And I've decided that everybody would want it, and I've checked with my mother and my girlfriend, and they said yes.
That is such a powerful point. What advice do you give to businesses that you meet, where you engage with them, when about, calling it quits, calling it moving on, not calling it a failure necessarily, but like you say, it failed forward.
Yes.
When do you tell an entrepreneur, look, here's a slap of reality?
Yeah.
How do you tell, and entrepreneurs, if anything, are the persistent bunch, and the enthusiastic, and the optimistic, and the glass is kind of half full.
Yes.
How do you tackle that?
Well, fortunately, because there has been so much failure, a lot of work has been done on that. And you'll get people like Steve Blank who coined the phrase, get out of the building. So he says, go out and make sure that there really is a market for your product. And that's what I do. I say to people, bring me 10 people who have promised that they will buy your product once it's in the market.
Okay, so you're not suggesting incredible studies, multi-million rand exercise. You're saying, show me the customers.
Precisely. If there is not a customer for your product, you don't have a business. And
does that mean you say then, okay, time to lock up the car? Or do you say, no, time to re-look at your offering?
Exactly, re-look. because there's often a seed of value in there. It may need, like, what was his name? Reed calls a pivot. You may need to relook at it and change direction, because there is a market for a variation on your product.
Powerful words. Thanks so much, Rick. Really appreciate it. And his contact details below. Thanks for watching.